I kind of expected this, but I wasn't as emotionally prepared as I thought. Neglect, disrespect, absolute refusal when it came to any intimacy, all pointed to the same thing. She was either having an affair, thinking about having an affair, or was simply tired of being my wife. I've kind of decided to lose her. Over the last few months, it's become easier for her to come to terms with it. What I didn't understand was why she didn't just leave. I mean, why delay this? Just say goodbye and move on with your life. I didn't transfer money because we didn't have much. We lived in a debt-free house, but only because it belonged to my grandmother and we moved there after she died. I already saw signs back then that I didn't like, so I talked to my parents and they agreed to keep the house in their name for at least a year, just to be sure. We had our own house, well, we in a bank. We lived there for 6 years before Sandy drank too much wine one night and dozed off, leaving a dozen candles burning, one of which was too close to the curtains. She was awakened by an alarm and managed to get out, but by then the entire living room was engulfed in flames. The firefighters arrived there about the same time as I did, preparing to fight the fire as I told them about the gun collection and all the ammunition I had stored. Around this time, several shots were fired, so they retreated to a safe distance and let it burn. One of my best friends was the captain of this particular station, and he wrote that it was too far when they arrived to help with insurance. Apparently, there was no stupidity clause in the insurance policy because they paid out, leaving us with a net amount of about $30,000. It was more than I thought we'd get, so we took her and moved into Grandma's house. We still had about $20,000 left, and she would get half of it, enough to start living in a decent apartment. I would have stayed where I was. I did a few more little things, and if we split up, she would be very disappointed. Like I said, I expected this. I just didn't expect it to go so calmly. I worked a different shift. My hours were later than hers. It was wintertime, and it got dark quite early in my area. I noticed that her car was not in the garage and the porch light was not on. I walked in calling her name. She didn't answer, and I found her at the dressing table putting on her makeup. She was wearing an LBD, not the one I was used to, brand new, with a higher hem and a lower neckline. I watched her for a few minutes while she ignored me. "Are we going somewhere?" "No, it's me. I have a date." She waited for an explosion, but it did not come. I just looked at her until she got nervous. "Did you hear me? I said I had a date. I'm dating another man." "No." "What?" I said no. No means no means no. You can date whoever you want, sleep with whoever you want as soon as you move. I will submit the documents as soon as I can, but you will not do this while we live under the same roof. Why don't you pack some things and stay somewhere else for a few days? Give me time to sort everything out, and then we'll talk about how to separate everything. For some reason, her laugh seemed almost crow-like. "I will not leave. You. I love this house, and when it's mine, I'll decorate it the way I like it. If you can prove you're a dear, at least I'll get most of the money when we're forced to sell. Do us both a favor and move in with your parents until this is all over." "No, you need to leave." "Oh, I'm going in about 30 minutes. Don't come here when I get back or I'll call the police. I'm sure I can think of something to get you kicked out. I heard they're holding you for 48 hours for domestic violence. I think by then, I'll be able to change the locks and get a restraining order." She was a little shocked when I smiled. "Whatever you think, don't do it. I'm serious, Henry. It's a done deal. They're going to fuck you now. Life is a bitch and then someone else has you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get this lipstick in order. This bright red should be the perfect color, don't you think?" I just smiled and left the bedroom. I knew she didn't have the courage to ask him to pick her up, which meant she was going to meet him. I walked through the garage, picking up the aluminum baseball bat I had been using during the summer. 4 good swipes took care of her headlights and taillights. She won't leave in this car. I came back and saw her purse lying on the counter. I opened it, noticing a 6-pack of condoms as I pulled out her phone. Not wanting to make a mess, I took it to the garage, took the battery out, put it on the workbench, grabbed a hammer and smashed it into 3 pieces. I reassembled the phone without the battery and threw it back into my purse. I almost poked pinpricks into the condoms, but stopped, thinking that she would claim it was mine. She walked into the kitchen as I was pouring coffee, wearing the highest heels I had ever seen. When she saw me, she frowned. "Get out!" she shouted, pointing to the door. I just smiled and took a sip of my coffee. She sighed. "Okay, if that's what you want. Look for police here soon. You might want to call your dad to get bail money when you can get out. I took another sip of coffee. Why would the cops come? I didn't threaten you. I didn't lay a hand on you. All I did was refuse to let you kick me out of my house. That's not what I'm going to tell the cops. You threatened me when I asked for a divorce and insulted me. I'm afraid for my life. They always believe the woman. I'm not kidding, Henry. You have about 30 minutes until I call. She stomped away as best she could in those heels. 5 minutes later, she could be heard screaming through the door. She burst in, and the look on her face made me a little nervous. Oh, you bastard. What did you do to my car? What makes you think that I damaged your car? You shouldn't leave it parked on the street like that. She just looked at me for a second. Never mind. I'll just call him to come pick me up. I'll even let you see me kiss him when I go out. Don't be surprised if you don't see my head when we drive away. It was my turn to make her nervous as I chuckled. Of course. Call him. This will give us the opportunity to get to know each other better. I can tell him what a crazy bitch you can be. I hope he doesn't have long-term plans. After all, you are proving to him that marriage vows don't mean much to you. She went up a few decibels when she discovered her phone wasn't working. Stomping, she returned wearing sneakers, carrying heels. Have a nice evening, I said, smiling. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You'll get yours, bastard. I could still hear her swearing as she walked down the street. It was almost too much when I saw her knock on the first door and not be let in. She must have repeated this for half a block until she realized no one was going to help her. Thank you, Mom. I called her when I understood everything, and she called all the neighbors. I grew up on this street, everyone knew me, and everyone loved me. There isn't much of it at all. I knew she would answer the phone soon, so I sat back and waited. It took the police about 20 minutes to respond. I didn't know it then, but she was back, staying in the shadows, waiting for the police to arrive. I knew one of the police officers, the girl I graduated from high school with. I invited them in and offered them a cup of coffee. They seemed nervous. Let me guess. You've responded to a call about a domestic disturbance. Do you see broken furniture? Do you see the abrasions on your knuckles, the torn clothes? They shook their heads. Then why do you think there were any riots? She said you threatened her, Henry. Told her you were going to ruin her life when she told you she was leaving you. I'm very sorry, Henry, but the law is clear. We must arrest you. God, this sounds serious. How serious is perjury? The man spoke first. If you have any proof of this, now is the time to show us. So I showed them a video taken with a cell phone camera. Both cops frowned. Well, that gives you a lot of options, Henry. Perjury is not in your hands. It is up to us. However, you can use the video to get a restraining order. You can clearly hear her say, "You'll get yours." A clear threat if we ever heard one. Looks like you guys don't need to be in close proximity to each other right now. You can apply tomorrow and give our names as proof. In the meantime, if you have some way to secure the house so she can't come back, that might be a good idea. If she comes back, call us. And Henry, I remember how sweet you can be when someone is mean to you, so don't, okay? Let this go to court and let it pass. Do you hear what I'm saying? Yes, ma'am, Sergeant. Sweet cheeks. Oh, sorry, I know no one has called you that since middle school, especially since you started carrying guns. Old habits, you know. You can't hide it under that uniform. It's still a world-class ass. Whoever is in your life right now is lucky, Heather. She blushed and left. I seem to have suddenly developed the ability to irritate any woman I come into contact with. The guy grinned. Sweet cheeks, huh? You're right. It's a world-class ass, but no one will see it now. She just went through a terrible divorce. You're not the only one who has a spouse who wants to date. Please don't make us come back tonight. They didn't have to go back. While I was talking to the police, my loving wife slipped into the garage with the bright idea of taking my car. The downside to this plan was that she threw her keys on the kitchen table and couldn't get in with the cops. And then she saw them. I always kept a set of monster keys on my workbench. That's what she called him when she saw him for the first time. It was an old, but in perfect condition, 1989 full-size 4x4 commuter. I think you could fit both of our other cars in it. It was only driven when I needed to haul something on my trailer, pull a friend's pontoon fishing 2 or 3 times a summer, and as a snowmobile. If you were careful, you would never get stuck. What she didn't take into account was that I had disconnected the circuit from the garage opener in case that's what happened, and to keep her out. She started the beast. The sound, incredibly loud in the small space, hit the garage opener button and waited until she thought it was up and released the clutch, thinking of getting away as quickly as possible. She should have turned on the light. Otherwise, she would have seen that the garage did not open. The garage door couldn't match the power the 454 produced, or the thrust the low gearing gave the beast. She flew backwards toward the sound of scraping sheet metal, straight into the front of the police car. It had enough momentum to throw the car back several feet, causing significant damage to the front end. Heather reached for the car door as the beast burst out of the garage. 5 more seconds and everything could have ended very badly. Her partner wasn't so lucky. He opened the door and was about to get in when she crashed into the patrol car, and the door knocked him about 10 feet down the driveway. Heather was a redhead, and I knew full well that she had a personality to match her hair. As I rushed upstairs to check on Officer Jones, she was dragging my loving wife out of the monster by her hair, screaming the entire time, "On the ground, bitch! Now!" My loving wife. Ginger, by the way, if anyone cares about her name, was pretty much out of her mind and just moaning. As soon as she was handcuffed, Heather rushed to her car and turned on the radio. "The officer is wounded! The officer is wounded! Send help to 411 Elm Drive now." Officer Jones was unconscious. Most of the impact was on his face, and it was pretty clear that his nose was broken. I carefully cradled his head in case of spinal injuries so that he would not choke on his own blood. I must have held his head for about 20 minutes before the first ambulance arrived. 10 minutes later, it looked like a police meeting. All the officers on duty were there. Heather drove with Officer Jones to the hospital because her car was disabled after giving a statement to the investigator and referring him to me. Ginger also got a free ride in the ambulance due to the bruises she received, a few airbag bruises and a pretty good bruise. I repeated all this 4 times before they were satisfied. Being a small town, I knew a couple of other police officers, including the main one, my friend's father. He was our baseball coach when we were in high school. "Any news on Officer Jones, Coach?" "No matter what rank he held, he will always be a coach for me." "Nothing definite, Henry. However, so far things don't look too bad. They will learn more when they study MRIs and X-rays." I thanked him and was already leaving when he called out to me. "Just so you know, your wife seems fine, if the charges we're charging her with are anything to go by. How can you accuse her of extreme stupidity? Here are the consequences." Ginger bailed, went to the bank and withdrew $19,000, leaving me with $1,000. She needed money to return her parents' deposit and to hire a good lawyer. I still had a restraining order in place, so we spoke through our lawyers. Our first meeting was extremely unsuccessful for her. My parents and my lawyer were with me because their input was relevant to the case. The lawyer listed her demands. She needs a house, or at least half the cost of it. I knew that she had arranged for a realtor friend to buy it for her, and then sell it back, using her half of the proceeds for the down payment. She knew that I would never agree to sell it to her. My lawyer took a paper out of his briefcase and handed it to the lawyer. He seemed surprised, and Ginger screamed. "What?" Her lawyer explained this to her. "The house belongs to his father. His name is nowhere in the documents. You can't get half of what doesn't belong to you." She was still seething with anger when he made his next demand. "My client wants all new furniture in the house. Living room, dining room, furniture from all bedrooms, silver service, and new kitchen appliances." My lawyer responded with new documents. "Everything we bought was paid for by check, from my father's account. We'd pick something out, I'd take her home, pick up Dad in his truck, he'd write a check, and I'd give him cash. I'm afraid that all the furniture rented belongs to the landlord. None of this is public property, but he has agreed to let you choose one of the bedrooms, for nostalgia, I suppose. After all, almost everything we owned was out of her reach." I fixed her car the following weekend, delivering it to her parents' house, when I learned they had left trying to post bail for their daughter. The judge called me and my lawyer into his office during the divorce, looking over the papers. He tried to hide his grin, but couldn't. "Very nice, boy. You cut her legs right out from under her. You knew this was coming, didn't you?" I shrugged. I didn't quite imagine this scenario, but I knew it wouldn't end well. I was just protecting myself. By all rights, she owes me 9,000 of the money she took. But if she just signs the papers, we'll be even. He grumbled. Quite fair. Back in the courtroom, he told Ginger that everything was documented and legal and there was nothing he could do about it. But I agreed to leave her all the money she took if she would just agree to the divorce. If not, then I would demand them. She was furious, but she had no choice. The judge slammed his gavel down, and I was a free man. She had to forget about me and focus on her other problems. Filing a false police report, assault on an officer in a vehicle. They lashed out at a bunch of trivial crap that was thrown out because they were mad at her about Officer Jones. She was lucky and ended up on probation for a year. I ran into her a month later at Walmart. She wanted to talk, so we ordered drinks from the cafe and sat down. It took her a minute to find her voice. Why were you so cruel to me? I could ask the same question. When exactly did you decide to give up on our marriage? You know, you could have just broken up instead of making the last few months so miserable. And what was the reason you shoved your date in my face? You've lived with me long enough to know that I won't just give up. She sat there for a minute before speaking. I wasn't happy, and I haven't been for a long time. I hated when our house burned down. I hated moving here. I hated leaving our friends. This is probably where it all started. Looking back, you are a good guy, and I should have just talked to you. That's probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say. I didn't want to go home either. I liked where we lived. If you had given me any indication that you wanted to stay, we would have taken the insurance money and bought something else. Even after we moved, we could still go back. I think that may have been partly true, but the truth was that you wanted to leave. Why is there so much singing and dancing at the end? I know it wasn't all your fault, but I blamed you for everything. I wasn't really interested in anyone else. I just wanted to hurt you. I regret the way I behaved. You were right. We should have just discussed everything and parted ways as best as possible. I got up and finished. Well, that was educational. You need to see someone, Ginger. You're completely screwed. I heard you were coming home, so I doubt I'll see you again. Try to live a decent life, and if you fall in love with someone else, use our experience as a learning tool. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. I saw her 4 years later when I returned for a friend's funeral. She looked almost the same, maybe 5 pounds heavier, with longer hair. She saw me and smiled, but we never talked. That suited me. It was better to leave the past in the past. About 2 years after this whole mess, I ran into Sergeant Sweetcheeks at the shooting range. She was wearing jeans and still had a killer ass. We talked, and I learned that she was engaged to Officer Jones, who had fully recovered. He got a pretty good settlement from my auto insurance, and they planned to use it for a down payment on a house. 18 months later, I saw her again and asked her how she was enjoying marital bliss. She snorted. He didn't seem to have as high an opinion of my ass as you did. I caught him with a different ass. And the ass belonged to a man. We didn't part on the best terms. I would like to sympathize, but I don't. She seemed surprised. Why not? Because now you're free again, I hope. I never got that sweet ass spanked in high school. This might be my chance. And just so you know, even if it's a world-class ass, I love everything about it, including your brain. I heard you're a detective now. Can you use this superior brain power to understand what I'm thinking? She blushed slightly before laughing. If that's what you're thinking, I'll have to arrest you. Anal sex is still illegal in 9 states. It was my turn to glow, but I smiled. Is this one of those states? No, you're lucky. If you really like this superb ass and are willing to treat me the way I deserve, you may find that I am inclined to share what I really like with the right man. Pick me up at 7. Put on a suit and don't say anything stupid. Now shut up and act. I showed up exactly at 7, in my best suit. I don't know if it was genetics or training, but even as stupid as I can be sometimes, I knew better than to complain about it. I didn't put her to bed until we were married, 9 months after our first date. All I can tell you is that it was worth the wait. And now, this is the captain of Sweet Cheeks. I may say stupid things, but calling her Sweet Cheeks in public is not the same thing, although she likes it when I talk like that in the bedroom. Ginger was seeing a psychologist. I don't know if this helped or not. She married twice, and her second husband seemed to be cautious. He seems to keep her on a pretty short leash and reminds her of me when she gets out of control by telling her that I'm not the only one who would do this to her. It seems to help her focus, at least on her cousin who told me about it. All I can say is good for her. Our daughter Kelly got married today. Our wedding gift to her was my grandmother's old house. Heather never liked him, and when her parents died, we moved into her house, a big 2-story old farmhouse. Our son Mark will receive it when we go to another world, and this, I hope, will not happen soon. After Kelly left for her honeymoon, I surprised my sweet cheeks with tickets to one of those ocean cruises, a 25th wedding anniversary gift. She always wanted to go, and I finally saved up the money to invite her along. 2 weeks traveling around Europe, her dream vacation. This got me some really good love and a rare shot at her back door. She says she likes it, but I think she only does it to please me, and despite my many faults, being a selfish asshole doesn't seem to be the case, so I only take what she decides to give, and I'm happy with it. I have to go. Sweet Cheeks calls me back to bed and gives me a little blue pill and a glass of water. Looks like it's going to be a very nice holiday.